Hey everybody, Ray here. You know, for a long time I've wanted to add some additional Infeed support to my job site table saw. Normally I get my roller stand out. If I've got a board that I want to rip that's 6 or 8 feet long or even 4 feet long, I'll balance it on that roller stand and run it through. But I wanted a solution that was a little bit more permanent that would take me up to about a 48-inch board and I could leave it permanently attached to my saw. And that's how I came up with this. It's really very simple because you know me, I don't do complicated, and it works very effectively at balancing a longer board as you're trying to rip it down on your job site table saw. So if you want to see how I made this, stick around and I'll show you. And don't forget, if you feel this video has some value, hit that thumbs up for me if you would. I'd really appreciate it. So you're probably like me. After watching several videos about how to try to do a certain project, you kind of take bits and pieces out of a bunch of different projects and come up with your own solution. So that's what I did here, and hopefully this will be helpful to you. What I decided to use was what's called UHMW polyethylene, which is ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene. And this is 3/4 of an inch thick. When I bought it, it was 4 inches high and 48 inches long. I'll show you how and why I cut this down. Now, a couple of reasons why I selected this material. One is it's very slick or slippery. So when you want to slide your wood along here when you're cutting it, it'll be no problem at all. The second thing is it is cut very squarely. So you know when you put everything together, everything should fit square. I've tested this with my square and it looks perfect. The other thing is that though it's a very kind of hard and dense plastic, it's not too hard to cut. It makes a mess and there's all kinds of shavings all over the place, but it's easy to cut. The first thing I did was determine how long I wanted this fence to be. Now, one of the considerations I had was that I have an Infeed table here that folds down and comes back up. And I didn't want it to get in the way of that Infeed table. So I had to keep it right inside of that, which put me about, 1.5 inches, 2 inches beyond the fence. The other thing I had to take into consideration was that I wanted it longer than my existing fence, but not so long that it would put extra weight and want to tilt the fence down like this. Now, once I knew where I wanted my fence to start, then I had to figure out how long I wanted it to be for my Infeed table. Again, remember, I didn't want it too long because I didn't want it to cause it to do that. So what I did was I came here. If I come to the edge of my table and I come out to here, that is 10 inches. And I decided that 10 inches would be plenty long enough for this extra Infeed table, at least in my case. Now remember, I don't want to hide my ruler here or interfere with any of my action on my slide. So I really need this board to be starting here, which now tells me that that board needed to be 8 inches. Now I was able to cut off that 48-inch piece because I knew how long this piece needed to be. That left me with, roughly 16 inches of board, which then I could cut down to the 8 inches that I wanted to fit right here, and that is going to be my little Infeed platform. Now remember, my polyethylene board was 4 inches high. The fence that comes with the saw is only 3 inches high. I decided that I wanted my board to be the same height as my fence. So when I clamped it on there, I wouldn't have any excess pressure near the top that might cause this board to come out of square with the table itself. So I cut off one piece here. And what's cool about this is for this saw, this piece that you cut off is just about perfect to be able to make a runner for some sort of sled or something that you might want to have. So I cut that piece off, and then you can see I'm still a little bit high. I'm going to cut one more piece off of here. I'll have myself 2 runners. This will have to be sanded down a little bit more, and then this board will now be the perfect height and match my fence. Now I want the holes to go through my bottom piece pretty straight, so that when they enter into this piece up here, they will be nice and straight. A friend of mine just recently asked me if I'd be interested in this drill guide tool because he doesn't use it anymore. I thought, what the heck, I'll take it home and I'll try it, and it works pretty good. Gives me a nice straight hole through there. Now we also want to countersink these screws, so I'll do that very quickly. So I've switched to a smaller drill bit here, and what we're going to do is go through the hole that we made in this sheet right here, and we're going to go into the edge of this right here down this way. And this is small enough that it's still going to leave plenty of room for the threads to catch here, but yet it'll get me started. I don't want to risk splitting this. This 48-inch piece of board cost $57, so I don't want to mess it up. Now I'm using a 1 5/8 inch coarse screw here. Fine screw might strip out too easily, so I'm using a coarse screw. We'll get it started with the drill here. And then just as it gets to seat, I will come back and tighten it with my hand drill. Okay, I've already put 2 of those in there, so now I have all 4 of those in there. We'll just tighten those down, make sure those are tight by hand. And now our bottom piece is nice and secure to our fence. Once I had all my screws in there, then I checked for square. I want everything in this fence to be as square as possible. It was slightly, I mean ever so slightly out of square. So all I had to do was to back my screws out a little bit and literally just take a piece of paper, that's how close it was, and put that piece of paper on this edge between this board, and now it is perfectly square. Okay, we're at a point where we want to do a little test fit before we proceed any further. Now you remember, one of the objectives was that I wanted to design this supplemental fence with the Infeed platform here such that I still had visibility of my ruler, which I do, and I also wanted to be able to have access to my adjustment wheel here to move my fence back and forth, and that all works great. The other thing that's really critical here is that this has to be square to this table in order for me to get good square cuts. And if we put that square on there, it is just perfectly square to that table. So I think we're in good shape here. We're going to continue moving forward. I will hold this to my fence using a clamp that looks like this. This part will clamp onto the fence. This part here will slip down into the end of my material here, such that when I tighten it up, it'll draw it close to my original fence. Now when I work with this, I'm going to start with a smaller drill and then graduate my way up to a 3/8 inch drill. This is difficult to drill through because this plastic tends to get wound around the drill. So I'm going to start with a smaller bit and work my way up to a 3/8 bit. When I get to that 3/8, what I'll be using is this centering jig. And some people call it a doweling jig. But when you put that on there, it clamps like a vise this way, and the hole that you're going to go into will be exactly in the center of your material. You don't have to have this. I just happen to have it. It allows me to be just a little bit more exact and precise, but you could certainly do this with just the drill on its own. We better change batteries. No, that's better. And you can see how thick that plastic material is, and it can bind itself around that drill bit. And that's why I started with a smaller bit, and then I'm going to move to my 3/8 bit using my centering jig here. I'll just center that over the hole. Okay, so our clamps then will fit down into the hole in the center of our polyethylene board here, and then snug that down so the supplemental fence is now snugged up against the original factory fence. And we can check this again for squareness, and yep, we're nice and square in there, just like we had hoped to be. And I think we're ready for prime time here. Now, the advantage that this will give us is that when I'm now trying to use a little bit longer board, this board will sit much more securely out here because I've got this extra 10 inches of infeed table, which is really going to be helpful in trying to keep things nice and straight and smooth as they go across that blade instead of rocking and rolling out here because the piece is so long. Now, when using this supplemental fence here, we have to take into account that it is now closer to the blade, because this is actually a bit more than 3/4 of an inch, closer to the blade than the original fence. So what I've done here is I've taken my ruler and I've set it at exactly 4 inches to the blade. Then I can come back here to the ruler guide that's on the saw, and I can loosen this up and slide my hairline down to where it is now on exactly on 4 inches, and tighten that back up. And now this is set to account for the fact that I've got the additional auxiliary fence here. So let's give this a try. And there you go. We are right at 4 inches, just like we wanted to be. Okay, so let's test this out with a little bit longer board here and see if we feel like we've achieved success. Well, I can tell you that that was much more stable having that infeed here. So I've had to rip down a whole bunch of 48-inch boards to create this effect that I want for a cabinet front. So I've had ample opportunity to test out this little fence with the infeed table. And I can tell you that I'm really happy with it. One thing I did notice, though, that you should be aware of is that if you get sloppy and you're pushing too hard on the back end out here, this piece of the fence can slightly deflect. So don't do that. You shouldn't be doing that anyway. You should be pushing straight in from the back and holding it against your fence here, not pushing against there. So if you do that, it'll slide through and it'll work perfectly. I've had no issues with it whatsoever. If that deflection is something you think will bother you, then what I would suggest is you recreate this, but use hardwood or something else. I'm pretty happy with this project. I hope this was helpful to you. It's a really easy project. Get out there and give it a try. If you like this video, don't forget, hit me with that thumbs up if you would. I'd appreciate it.